For today, we're playing AC Mirage with the RTX 2070. And to start it off, we're playing the game at 1080p at the very high settings. Let's go into the settings. Here we are at the very high settings. Here we are in the actual game, sitting in the 90s up into the 100s. And we are playing at the very high settings as well. So we have plenty of headroom to go down to the high settings or even the medium settings to get more performance. But obviously for a single player title, if you're getting 60 FPS and above, that's plenty. So no reason to actually go ahead and lower the settings. It's playing fantastically right now. Alright, going to the city, the FPS will fall down a little bit, but obviously it's far more CPU intensive than it is GPU intensive, so FPS won't be affected too much. Alright, going up into the sky though, we fall down into the low 80s / the mid 80s. So yeah, 1080p, it's running beautifully. The game does stutter here and there though, so keep that in mind. It's not perfectly smooth at all times, but FPS wise, it does amazing. Lowest FPS was around 75, but on average, it's in the 90s and above. And for the VRAM, we're sitting at 6.3 gigs. This card has 8, so we're fine there as well. And system RAM at 14 gigs almost. So again, no issues at all. This game is running beautifully. I do have one more area that I want to test out, which is in the intro of the game. So let's go back out and see how we do that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the fact that this game is very CPU intensive. So if you've got a weaker CPU, your FPS might fall below what you see here. So keep that in mind. But if you've got a recent-ish CPU, you should be just fine. FPS should be what you see here. Alright, in the intro, this area was quite intensive. Let's see how far the FPS falls once we go down here. 76 FPS. Yep, far more intensive for sure. Time to go to sleep, buddy. Boom. You know, a torch in the bush isn't a good idea, but I mean, hey, I guess you put it out. Now, in this section, at lowest was around 72 FPS and averaging around like the low 80s. So, it's definitely far worse, but still above 60 FPS. So, we're doing just fine. Now, go to sleep, my friend. Go to sleep. Ooh, punched out. This game has a stamina system, so it's kind of weird. You can't just spam attacks over and over again. You have to actually stop. And you're done. Ooh, love the parry. So there we go. That's 1080p with AC Mirage at the very high settings. You can use DLSS if you want to, but with these frame rates, I think we're doing just fine. Above 60 FPS at all times pretty much. So there's really not much point in using DLSS and getting more. Okay, let's go up to the max settings this time, which is called, I think, very ultra. No, it's ultra high. I'm stupid. Yeah. So let's go up to that and disable all of this. I don't need it. And see how this card does. Wow. Surprisingly very close. The 90s and 100s. Quite fantastic. But this area isn't the most intensive. We'll see how we do later on. But so far, this is a good start. Our VRAM's already at 6.38 gigs. So a bit higher than the very high settings. But everything else is quite similar. So we fell into the low 80s at the very high settings. And at the max settings, we're sitting in the mid 70s. Our VRAM though is almost at 7 gigs. So it's getting close to the limit of this card. Again, we only have 8 gigs in total. So yeah, so far at the max settings, we're sitting at around 70 to 80 FPS on average. It can go up to the 90s as well still, but only in those easier scenes. Back into the intro of the game. Let's run to the zipline and see how far we fall. Again, at the very high settings, it fell into the low 70s. So still quite good. And hopefully at the max settings, we can actually hold 60 FPS the entire way through. Already down into the low 70s. That's not a good sign. And down into the high 60s. Yeah, it's not too bad to be honest. It's very similar. So I guess if you want to, you can play at the max settings and have a good time playing this game. At 1080p anyway. Now playing the game at 440p, at the max settings still, and no DLSS. Let's jump back into it. Okay, so I'm back here again because the game bugged out. I showed you guys the settings already, so you guys already saw that. But the game wasn't playing at 440p properly. So I was sitting in the 70s here instead of the 50s. So yeah, it's a weird issue. I did have TAA enabled, but it was at native res. So it's kind of weird how I was bugging it out. But at least it's working now. So it's good news for me. But yeah, sitting in the low 50s now, and even the high 40s. I mean, it's decent still to be honest, but not ideal. With DLSS though, we should be able to get 60 FPS just fine. But as it is at native res, it does fall into the 40s and 50s quite easily. The game looks gorgeous though. It looks incredibly sharp and just wow. It looks amazing. And going up into the sky, we fall down into the low 40s and the mid 40s. The most important part, how far did we fall in this section? So I think at this point our lowest is around 44 FPS. But coming down here, ooh, feeling kind of laggy already. 43, oof, getting close. 40, there we go. 39. So our lowest now is 39. That is insane. So yeah, at this point you have the option of lowering the settings of the game or using DLSS. Okay, let's back out, enable DLSS, and go again. Balance DLSS into the 70s. I believe we have the high 50s here. So it's quite the jump. And the graphics look amazing still. Incredibly sharp. It's very crisp. Can't really see any blurriness. Shimmering. Looks amazing. So for me, this is the way to go. Coming down. Wow. We do get close. We are very close to the 60s now. And even the high 50s. That sucks. So yeah, it does fall into the high 50s, but honestly, feels very similar to the 60s anyway. So I'm not too worried about it. I think that's it for 1440p. Let's back out, play the game in 4K, and go again. 4K at the max settings, no DLSS. This will be pushing our luck for sure, but let's just see how we do. Might be playable still, who knows. And in the 30s. But it's honestly quite impressive still. This card is pretty old at this point, and it was never targeting 4K gaming, but still able to get 30 FPS at the max settings is quite impressive. It's so sharp, it's so crisp, it looks amazing. And 30 FPS is playable, but we have DLSS, so there's not much point in not using it. I think that this will fall down into the mid-20s, and even the low 20s. So going up into the sky, still the 30s, quite impressive. Held the 30s the entire way through. Alright, back into the intro. In the 30s to begin with. No surprises there. And then we fall down into the mid-20s / the high 20s. It feels so laggy now. Yeah, 24 FPS. Look at that. 22 FPS was the lowest. That is crazy. It's far too laggy at this point to be playable. Performance DLSS is what I'm going with. Hopefully 60 FPS is actually doable with it. Back into the intro. Wow. So close though. It's the mid to high 50s and the low 60s occasionally. But yeah, it's pretty good to be honest. The game looks fantastic still. It looks very sharp and very crisp. Can't see any blurriness or any shimmering in the distance, which is good. If you must get 60 at all times, I would lower the settings of the game to either very high or high and use DLSS on top of it. Alright, down here we are sitting in the mid 40s and the high 40s. That is crazy. It's like a 20 FPS increase pretty much. So yeah, if you're happy with these frame rates, stick with the max settings and the game is playable for you. If not, then lower the settings and you're chilling there as well. Okay, I think that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next time. Next video. See you guys there.